Okay, hello and welcome at W203 to Chapter 2. So today we are going to be going over Chapter 2, Configuring a Network Operating System. So we'll learn on how to get into either the switch or the router and how to manage that switch and the router, give it the IP addresses, for example, or setting up the passwords or the host name, things like that. So we'll learn how to actually use, this is your first time doing some hands-on directly to the router or the switch. Here are the objectives of Chapter 2. So we'll do all of that. Hopefully by the end of the chapter you'll be a little bit more comfortable in connecting to the router and the switch. And I'll use the packet tracer to actually show you how to do some of this stuff. So you can always refer to this lecture if you have any issues or any problems you want to just go over the basics. Okay? So let's get started. What is an operating system? An operating system in general, I like to use a definition that says that an operating system is really the interface between the between the user, the hardware, and the software. So it's the one that communicates between the hardware, the software, and the user when it gives a command. For example, the three parts are the shell. This is where the user commands the operating to do something, either by using the mouse or just typing a command by itself. The kernel, on the other hand, is the part of the operating system that communicates between the software and the hardware of your device, either the router or your operating system. And of course, you've got your operating system, the hardware itself. Here's an example. An operating system will go, if it's on a PC, it goes into the hard drive, grabs the files, puts them into RAM, and then once these files are in opcode in the RAM, then these files are transferred into the CPU, where the CPU interprets the data, process it, and then commands the operating system to either, for example, send that file to the printer or display something on the screen. Okay, so you need an operating system such as Windows 8 or OS X Windows for an Apple computer to be able to operate the hardware, the software, and the commands that it takes from the user. Now, the switch and the router operating system work a little bit differently. They're not there really to make changes, to run applications. They're really there to move data as quickly as possible. For a router, they're responsible for connecting data outside your LAN. For switches, they're operating inside a local area network, moving frames around as quickly as possible. So you need to configure them, set them up. For example, what type of security do you want on these routers or switches? Who's allowed in and who's not allowed? How do you find the best path to destination? Should I create some tools like that? There are different types of operating systems that can run on your router with different features. The operating system is always found on a flash memory chip that can be inserted in the router or a switch. Now, depending on how big your flash is, it can hold multiple operating systems. And also remember, the operating system that's on the flash can be everything's gone, and that's a big, big problem, especially in our labs, because students that are not experienced or inexperienced with the routers or the switches, they may just type a command delete flash, and then your router or switch will not boot up anymore. So you got to know how to, or for example, if the flash may have a corrupted operating system in there, so you need to know how to restore the operating system back in. We'll learn to do that tonight, and maybe not till next semester. We'll learn on how to restore an operating system that is on the flash. All right, so What functions does the internetworking operating system, but that's what the iOS is for. What function does it have? It does security. It can act as a firewall to permit or deny packets from coming into your LAN. It does also routing, finding the best path to the destination. It does quality of service, setting priorities to different packets. For example, over IP packets or live streaming video packets should go first before data packets. Routers also have to be addressed. Every interface needs to have an IP address. On the interfaces, you got to be able to manage a whole bunch of different resources as well. As you can see, it's just a box. It does not have a monitor or a keyboard. We have to use our keyboard, our PC, to connect to the router so we can manage it. To get into the router and using the command line interface, the CLI, there are 3 different ways to get into the router. You can use your laptop, use a cable, and then connect through the console port, and then use the software on your laptop to go through that. Typically PuTTY or Hyper Terminal. Now, you may use an auxiliary port as well from your PC to the router. And here's the auxiliary port if you connect to it. The auxiliary port, that means on your PC you should be connected to a modem, and then you connect to the auxiliary port. If you connect through the serial port, then you connect to the console port. Now, Telnet or Secured Shell, SSH, you only do that after you have configured your router. So we'll practice both of these, the console and telnetting, today, because we will configure. We'll do some basic configuration on the router itself. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's practice some of this. Let me bring in a 1941 router, and let me just close it. And let me bring in 2 devices, 2 PCs, one genetic PC and another one right here. You know what? Let me bring in a switch, and I'll place it right here. And let me connect these devices. I'm going to go in and connect a straight through cable connected from the Ethernet NIC to any port on the switch. Let's just the fast Ethernet 01 port. Let's go connect PC2 from fast Ethernet 0, the NIC, to the switch 02. And let me connect 03 from the switch to the router gigabit 00. So this is the physical wiring between the routers. So the switch, you may have multiple PCs also attached to the switch. This is really a local area network. This interface right here on the router is called the gigabit 00. That's the default gateway to these 2 PCs. So whenever any of these 2 PCs don't want to communicate, anybody that don't want to communicate in this LAN, by default they go to the gateway. The router is the gateway that takes you to the outside world. Okay? Just give me 1 second. I want to make sure that we are still recording. And yes, we are. All right, let's continue. So now, how do I connect to the router so I can configure it and set this IP address on this interface? So I'll go to connection, and here is the console cable. I click on it, I go over the PC, and I'll choose the RS-232. That's the 9-pin serial port on the back of your PC. If you don't have the 9-pin, most likely you'll use your USB port, and then you probably have to get either an adapter, or now that they actually make cables that can connect to the USB. Stretch the cable, go over to the router, and connect it to the console port. And there's your console port. Now you go to the PC, you go to the desktop, and click on the terminal. This is the software that you're going to use to connect through the cable into the router. This is similar to Hyper Terminal. What this is saying is this port on the back of your PC is set up to send out 9600 bits per second, 8 bits at a time, no parity, and so on. So accept all of these configurations on that port. And once you accept that, then you are in the router command line. Now we are right in. Now here it's asking us, once you get in, do you want to continue with the configuration dialog? We always say no. That means that the router did not, the operating system, the iOS, did not find a configuration file stored in the router, and it needs you to create one now. Now the reason we say no, because if you say yes, it's going to ask you every single question about how to configure the router, and it takes too long to do. So what we're going to do is we say no, because we are going to create our own configuration file. All right, now we are right now at the user mode. Once you type no and you hit twice, hit enter twice, you are at the user mode. How do you know you're at the user mode? Because you see the prompt, and right after it, you see the greater than sign. At the user mode, you really cannot do much in terms of configuring the router or setting up anything. It's really for information only, to check the status of the router or the switch. If you need to do any configuration, you got to type the command enable. Enable will change the prompt to the pound sign, the one with the pound sign. Now you are at the privilege mode. At the privilege mode, then you can make changes and view more and display more data. More commands are available for you at the privilege mode. So to go from the user mode to the privilege mode, you need to type the command enable. Now, if you need to create a configuration file, you got to type the command configure from the privilege mode, configure terminal. And now you are at the global configuration mode. So when you see the prompt router config, that means you are at the global configuration mode. Okay. Now, if you need to go to the interface and give it an IP address, you got to go to another mode called the specific global configuration mode. All right, a specific mode. So let's go to the interface, space gigabit 0/0. And let's give it an IP address. Now I'm there, right? So now I am at 0/0 when I can give it. Now, so here's question number one that you have to answer. Remember, I'm always going to ask some questions, and I want you to write them down in a Word document and send it to me as a homework. So you get all the questions I'm going to ask you later on, and that's proof to me that you actually listened and took notes in the lecture. So here's question number one. What are the 4 different modes that you can be in a router? The user mode, that's indicated by the greater than sign. You type enable to get into the second mode, which is the privilege mode. Then you do configure terminal to get into the third mode, called the global configuration mode. And then you go into a specific mode, specific global configuration mode. Now it depends, what commands do you type? It depends on what that specific configuration mode you're going to get into. It could be an interface, it could be routing protocol, it could be a line that you want to configure. If you type the command end, you go all the way back to the privilege mode. If you type exit, you go back to the user mode. Okay? Now let's try one more thing. Let's say you don't know what command to get into the privilege mode from the user mode. So you use the question mark. The online help question mark will list all the commands for you that are available for you to do at the user mode. So you take a look and you type the letter E, because you see that the word enable starts with the letter E. If you just type the letter E and hit enter, the router gets confused. It says this is an ambiguous command. Why? Because it sees 2 commands that starts with the letter E, enable and exit. And it didn't know which one you want to execute. So if you type the letters EN, bingo, it takes you to the privilege mode. So when you type the letter EN, because the only command that starts with the letters EN is enable, enable, the router immediately executes it for you. So from now on, I'm going to be using shortcuts. Instead of typing the whole command, I'll just use shortcuts to execute those commands for us. For example, if I want to go into the global configuration mode, I type config instead of the word configure. And instead of typing the word terminal, I'll just write config T, the letter T. And I am at the global configuration mode. At the global configuration mode is where you are going to start creating a configuration file. Let's go to the gigabit Ethernet right here and assign an IP address to it. So I'll go INT for the word interface. I'll write G for gigabit 0/0, which is the location of that interface. Okay, now I'm at that specific interface global configuration mode. And let's describe what this interface is. So you write the command DES. Let's say you don't know how to spell description. All you have to do is just hit the tab key, and it writes out the command for you, description. And now the command description does not really execute anything. It's just a comment for you when you are looking at your configuration file. It'll just describe what the command, what that interface is for. So let's just write, this is LAN 1. All right. Now after describing the command, let's give it an IP address. You type IP, the word add, instead of writing out the whole word address. And let's assume the address is 192.168.10.1 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and we need to activate that interface. By default, the interface is shut down. As you can see here, it's red. So you type the command no shut, and as you can see, it starts to negotiate with the switch, and after a little while, it'll turn green. Okay? So we just configured an interface on a router. Now let's go and configure the hosts. So I'll close the Hyper Terminal application, and then I'll go to the IP configuration part right here, and let's do a static IP address on the router, on the PC. Now the IP address should start with 192.168.10. The first three numbers should be the same. We'll discuss that later on. The host name, which is the fourth byte, should be different than the default gateway. We gave the default gateway 1. Let's give this guy 2. Same subnet mask, and the default gateway is really this IP address right here on that router, which is 192.168.10.1. That's it. Let's do the same thing for PC2. Click on PC2, go to the desktop, and let's give it an IP address 192.168.10.3. Same subnet mask and the same default gateway. That one. All right, let's close this. Stay on PC2 and go to the command prompt right here. If you type the command IP config, let's type /all, that's going to display the configuration that you did. The first two, this is the MAC address of that PC. This is the link local IPv6, which we'll discuss later on. And here's the IPv4 configuration that we just did. All right, it's typically when if you have any problem connecting to the outside world, like let's say the internet, you should always ping your default gateway and make sure that you have connection between you and the default gateway. So let's start the command ping 192.168.10.1, and you should get some replies, as you can see, on 10.1. Okay, you can also ping the other PC because you are all in the same LAN. So let's ping ping 192.168.10.2, and 10.2 also replies. All right, so we just configured the LAN. There you go. All right, let's close that PC, and let's go back to PC1, close the configuration, and go back to the terminal. Now I'm back into the terminal. Now once I'm finished with the configuration, I can do END and hit enter, and I'm back at the privileged mode. All right? All right, let's go back to the slides and see what the slides got to say. So here's, we saw how we can connect to the console port, right? Telnetting, we'll see that in a few minutes. And here is PuTTY. You know what? Let me show you how to telnet. It's a good idea since we are already configured the interfaces. Now let's say you don't want to use this cable anymore. In fact, what I'm going to do right now, since I no longer need, since I got an interface right here with an IP address, I no longer need to have a physical cable connected to it to be next to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this cable. Click on the X and take out the cable. Click on the arrow. And now let me go to the PC0 right here and go to the command prompt. Oh, wait a second. I can't. No. We have to set up the passwords onto the router. Sorry about that. I got to put the cable back in. Now we got to set up the telnet password so you'll be able to telnet. An IP address is not good enough. So go back and let's bring in the console cable. And let me bring that back in. All right, and go to terminal. Okay, now I'm back in. All right, never mind. We'll continue. We'll do the telnetting later on. All right, so that was the using either, now the software that we use in class, or you can download, you can use PuTTY. Hyperterminal used to be part of the Windows, I think XP, and prior to that it used to come part of the operating system. Now you can get any of these for free. You just Google them. I prefer PuTTY. It's easy to use and you can use SSH, and this is what it looks like. You click on serial and bingo, open, and you're in. No other settings you have to do. All right, so we looked at some of the modes. We discussed that already, the user mode and the privilege mode. Well, we're going to have to set up passwords to prevent unauthorized users from going into any of these modes. So we'll see how that works. And we'll do some of this. We did some of the IP address configuration, but we used shortcuts, right? All right. And you can type disable instead of the end. I usually either write exit or end, and sometimes you can use Control Z, the letter Z, to allow you to get out. All right, so we'll see some of that as well. I'll show you how to set up the passwords when we get in there. All right, now, and I will show you the, if you want any references to your commands, just here are the steps on how to get in there. And you can have all the different commands that you need. Just go to cisco.com. Click on support and just follow these step by step, and it'll take you to all the commands that you need to navigate within your iOS, any type of iOS. Okay, now let's use the online help. You can use the online help. By the way, if you use the question mark right next to the letters, the operating system is going to list all the commands for you that are available for you to execute. So in this case, it knows that there are two commands that starts with the letters CL, clear and clock. So you write the word clock and then you put a question mark after that, and it writes the word set for you. And then put a question mark and then displays here, you got to put hours, minutes, and seconds. So you put those in, then you put a question mark after that. Then it tells you what options you need to type. You can either type a number or the word, the month. Like let's say April, in this case they wrote June. And then you put a question mark, it tells you have to type in the year. So by putting space question mark, it's constantly telling you what you can do. If the command does not come after you put the question mark, that means it's not available for you and you cannot execute it. So the online help, the question mark, can navigate you step by step in typing your commands. All right. I will use the tab key to, if in case I don't want to write the whole command, I'll just type the first couple of letters. I hit the tab, and it will write out the command for me. I'll show you how to do that. I hardly ever use the Control R and Control A. I do use the Control Z, so instead of typing the word end, I'll just press the key, the Control and the letter Z, and that will take me immediately to the privilege mode, no matter where I was. Control C, I usually execute that in when you're at the command prompt, when you want to excuse me, when you want to abort a command from executing. I use the upper arrow key to repeat a command. That's also very useful. The Control Shift allows you to interrupt also a process such as ping or trace route. I don't use that as much either. And I don't use Control R, Control A, or Control Shift key. Maybe I should. I don't know. All right. So when you execute the commands, any commands that you execute, they immediately go into the RAM, and the RAM is called. Anything that's running in the RAM is called the running configuration file. Anything that you have here should be saved in the non-volatile RAM, because that's where the router goes in to grab the configuration file. If it's not in the non-volatile RAM, then you cannot then you don't have a configuration file. In other words, if you create a configuration file and never save it in the NVRAM, then you lose everything next time you reboot your router. What's in the flash? It's really the operating system. That's the big thing. The iOS, the full image of the iOS. Okay, so we got to be able to back up the operating system and back up the NVRAM. We'll learn how to do that, like I told you, maybe next time. The show version command displays a lot of data for you. Oops, let me just go back a little bit. It tells you what your operating system is, the name of it, right here. In this case, it's C1900, which means that this operating system is for a 1900 switch or router in this case, right? And so on. Okay, let's get into the basics. Why do you need a switch? Well, the only way to be able to, the switch is the one that connects all the devices in the LAN, like we discussed it last time. And we can actually put security, as we will learn later on these ports to allow only PC1 to go through. And we'll learn how to do that. So the way you configure the switch is the same way you would configure a router. So since we are already on the router, let's go through the basic configuration steps that you would do when you purchase either a new router or a new switch. Number one, the first thing you should do is disable the DNS lookup. What does that mean? That means this is to make sure that if you type a command by a mistake, the router is not going to go and look up the DNS server and think that you typed in a name and he wants to retrieve an IP address for you. So when you disable that, the router will not, you will save time by not holding you from finishing out your configuration and doing the lookup. So how do you do that? From the privilege mode, you type config T and you type no space IP domain lookup. So no IP domain lookup. You gotta spell domain right. Here we go. Still not right. Here we go. No IP domain lookup. That will disable the DNS lookup. So that's step number one. Step number two. So this way, by the way, there's no IP domain lookup. So now if I type a command by a mistake, I misspelled it, for example, it'll just ignore it and continue. It will not go continue. It will not go and look up a name in the DNS server. Step number two, change the prompt, the host name of the router. The host name should indicate the location of the device. For example, if you are telnetting or remotely accessing your device, you want to know where that device is. If you're going to the one in LA or Chicago or New York and you're jumping from one router to the other, if you don't know the name of the router that you are in, you're going to be in trouble if they are all named the same as router. So how do you change the host name of a device? You type the command host name space, and let's say in this case we'll call it NJ for New Jersey. Enter. All right. So the second thing is creating a domain. Changing the host name of the router. Third, you should always create a banner. A banner is a statement that is going to come up when you try to get into the router, a display that will tell the user if they are, for example, authorized to go into the router or not. You know, for example, and you can create two types of router. There is the message of the day, MOTD, or the login banner. That banner will come up, only for 24 hours. Login is every time you're trying to log in. So let's create banner space. Let's do a login banner, and then put open quotes. The quotes could be a pound sign, a number sign, or quotes, or even one quote. I think that would work too. So let's say authorized users only, and close the quotes. We'll see how that works later on. So there you go. So again, let me repeat. Disable the DNS lookup by typing no IP domain lookup. Creating a host name, you write the command host name, and in this case we wrote New Jersey. Create a login banner. If you wanted to create a message of the day banner, you will write the command MOTD right here instead of the word login. And then now we need to secure the router. Let's make sure that if anybody's trying to go into the console port, they're going to be prompted with a password. So from the config mode, you write the command line console 0, enter. And then you write the word password. Let's call it Cisco, enter. And to make sure that when the user comes in, he's going to be prompted for the password, you write the word login. So there you go. Now I just created the console password. Now anybody that's trying to go in through the console port, they are going to be prompted with a password. All right, now let's test this out. Do control and press the key control and the letter Z and hit enter. Now I'm back to the privilege mode. Tap the word exit. Now and hit enter again. Now you see the word authorized users only. That's the login banner. Now it's prompting us for a password. That's the console password that I've just created because I'm trying to go through in the console port. So you type in Cisco. You see the command, the word Cisco is nothing is going to appear while you're typing. All right, they do that on purpose. Now I'm in the user mode. Okay, so from now on, every time you're trying to go through the console port, you need the password Cisco. All right, let's type EN. Let's go to the privilege mode. Config T. Now, to go into the privilege mode, you should have a password, and that password is typically encrypted. So you should use the encrypted password called enable secret, and let's call it Cisco 1. Okay. So from now on, every time you type the EN and hit enter, you're going to be prompted with a password. And the password is going to be Cisco 1. The word secret means that this password, Cisco 1, is encrypted. The console password is not, but we'll encrypt it later on. Remember one thing, I see a lot of students making mistakes. The word password does not exist in this command. Okay, so if you typed in, I get some students typing enable secret password Cisco 1. If you did that, then your password is password Cisco 1. And a lot of people don't just think it's Cisco 1. So be very careful. Don't use the word password in here. It's just enable secret and whatever you want your password to be, you type that in. By the way, space, if you write Cisco space 1, that counts. The space counts as a character. If you use capital letters, that also counts. All right, let's test it out. Control the letter Z, type exit, enter, enter. What's the password to get into the console port? Cisco, enter. You type EN. What's the password to get into the privilege mode? Cisco 1, enter. There you go. Now, let's say I want to remotely access through the Ethernet port. This guy can telnet and PC0 can telnet. We have to set up a telnet password on the router. To do that, go into the config mode, config T, and let's do line VTY, that means virtual terminal, 0 space 4 means five different persons can telnet into the router, remotely access the router at the same time. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5. 0 counts as 1. All right, so all 5 sessions, hit enter, should have the password Cisco 2. Is it Cisco 1? Yes, Cisco 2. And then make sure they are prompted with a password by typing the command login. All right, so we can actually now telnet to the router. You can telnet from PC1. You don't have to telnet from PC0 if you don't want to. So in fact, you know what I'm going to do? Let's take out the console port, the console cable. We don't need it anymore. No longer you need to be physically connected to the router. You can use any of the PCs to remotely access the router. So let's take out the cable, click on the white area, and click on X, take out the cable, and click on this. And let me go on PC1. Go from the command prompt and type the command telnet space. Let's telnet through the default gateway IP address. By the way, you can telnet from any interface that is active. That's why it's virtual. You're not dedicated to this interface. But since this is the only one that's been configured, let's go through it. 192.168.10.1. That's the IP address of the default gateway. I hit enter. Now they've prompted me with a password. What's the password to get in? Cisco 2. Right? I want the user mode. Now I type EN. They're asking me for the password to get into the privilege mode. You type Cisco 1. Bingo. See, now from now on, I no longer need the console port to get in. Okay? Now, let's display the configuration file that we did. And that configuration file is running in the random access memory, in the RAM. And it's called running config. So type the command show, sh for show, space run, R-U-N. And that shows the running configuration file. By the way, here's the host name that we typed. Here's the enable secret password. As you can see, it's scrambled. You can't see it. And when you see the word more, let's hit more. There are some other commands that are in there by default. So here is no IP domain lookup, disabling the DNS lookup. Hit more. Here is the fast Ethernet 00 interface that we did. And here is the password. You see these two passwords are in clear text. And the reason for that, the console password and the VTY password, is because of this command by default is in the configuration file, no service password encryption. So let's remove that and make sure that these two passwords are also encrypted to make sure that if anybody gets into the excuse me, into the configuration file, that they won't be able to see these two passwords in clear text. So to do that, let's go to config T. Now let's see what is that command to configure the file. Let's say you don't know what it means, what it is. So just type S. You know it starts with service. So write SER and hit the tab key. Writes the word service. And just write PAS, hit the tab key. And write service password encryption. Without the word no, if you hit enter, that will immediately, that just encrypted the password Cisco and the Cisco one. How do you know that? Let's type the word end, exit, or end, it doesn't matter, or Control Z. And then do show run again, enter. And go all the way to the bottom by hitting the space bar. And you see now the passwords are encryption. If you type no service password encryption now, these passwords will still be encrypted. They don't come back. It's just if you change the password, they'll come clear after that. They'll clear up. They'll be in clear text notes. Okay? So now the configuration file is in the NVRAM. All right. Now, if I turned off the router, I'm going to lose everything that I did. So you have to put it in the non-volatile RAM. So if you ever need to reboot, you'll see it in there. Let's see and make sure that the non-volatile RAM doesn't have a configuration file. So I'm going to do show start. Start is for startup dash config. You know, when I wrote show run, that just displays the, I didn't write, I should have wrote running dash config, which is the configuration file in the RAM. See? Show start, oh, I should have, now I'm going to use the upper key to repeat the command because I misspelled startup. Should start up dash config. Okay, it says no startup config. So now if I really rebooted the router, I'm in trouble. So now I'm going to copy, run, instead of typing the word running dash config, start, instead of writing the word startup config. So what I'm doing is I'm copying the running configuration file, the file that I just did, the configuration file, and I'm saving it in the non-volatile RAM, the startup config, so that when I reboot, the operating system will find a configuration file and configure, set up the router for use. So let's hit enter. It's going to say, are you sure that you want it to be called startup-config? That's what's in the brackets. If you hit enter, that means you are accepting it. Do hit enter. And you hit enter, and now you just copied it. And now if you type show start, the configuration file is there and it's saved. Now you can reboot the router. Let's reboot it. You type RE from the privilege mode, RE load, reload, enter, confirm, enter. Actually, if you are telnetting, they're not going to allow you. So let's do, yes, you lose connection. All right, let's telnet again. Telnet 192.168.10.1. Okay, maybe it. Maybe I know what happened. Now it's booting. It's reloading. See, we got to first it's reloaded. It didn't display it on the screen, so it did reboot. We gotta wait and telnet. Let's try now. 192.168.10.1. And now I'm in. There you go. Cisco. Cisco 2, and I type EN, and I type Cisco 1 to get into the privilege mode. All right, let's go back. So now you learned how to do the basics. So here's question number 2. What are the basic configurations for a router or a device? And what are the commands to do them? Well, number 1, disabling the DNS lookup by typing no IP domain lookup. Step number 2, configuring a host name. You type the command hostname space, let's say NJ for New Jersey. And configuring a banner, a login banner, or a message of the day banner by typing banner, login, and in quotes, authorized user only. All right, then you set up the passwords. The console password by typing line console 0, enter. Password Cisco, enter. And then the command login. Then you should create an enable secret password. Type the command enable secret Cisco 1. And finally, you create a telnet password by typing the command line VTY 0 space 4, enter. Type the password Cisco 2, password Cisco 2, and then the word login. All right? That's question number 2. Let's go back to the slides. And I think we covered pretty much a lot of this stuff. All right, so configure a host name. We know how to do that. I showed you how to do this. Same thing you do it with the switch, the enable, the console password, the VTY password. We saw all of that in action, right? So let's go through that. Here's your console password, the VTY password. Encrypting all the password by doing service password encryption, right? Showed you how to do that. The banner messages, right? Message of the day, the MOTD or the login. You don't have to use the pound sign, by the way. You should, you do what we did, the one with the quotes, all right? The show running config, that, usually type show run. If you need to delete anything, you can delete the startup, but on the switch you also have to delete VLAN database to get rid of everything, not just the startup config. If you want to clean up your router, you just type, if you want to clean up the configuration file in the NVRAM, on the router you just type erase startup config. But on the switch you have to do 2 things. You have to type erase startup config and delete VLAN.dat. All right, capturing a text, we usually don't do that. I usually highlight, right-click, copy, and I go put it in Notepad. We'll show you how to do that some other time, though. All right. We showed you how to, I also showed you how to configure the IP address on the host, right? This is if you want to go to a DNS server, which we cannot do. All right, so we'll learn how to do that. There's one thing not do is how to configure the IP address on a switch. So we could do that. And let's say, here, I need a console cable to get into the switch. So what I'll do is, I'll take a console cable. Let's go from PCU1 this time. RS-232 to the switch console port. I go to, I'll click on there. I'll go to the terminal. Say OK. Here, I'm going to type en config t no IP domain lookup. See, I'm repeating everything that I did. Let's call it host name SW1. Right? Forget about a banner or IP address. Now, if you want to create a virtual interface, you type INT. First of all, the default gateway, which is this guy, you do it at the config mode. So you type IP, write DEF, and hit the tab key. And if you remember, the default gateway is 192, 168.10.1. And then to give the IP address to the switch, you give it to a VLAN, and VLAN 1 is already been created for you. So you just type INT VLAN space 1, okay? And you give the IP address to the VLAN. So you say IP at 192.168.10. Well, dot 1 was given to the default gateway, dot 2 to PC0, and dot 3 to PC1, so let's give him dot 4. The only reason, by the way, you give an IP address to the switch is if you want to telnet to it. Let's give it the subnet mask address, 255, 255, 255.0. And then you type no shut to activate it. If you want to telnet to the switch, you have to create the VTY password and the enable password. So let's do those. Type exit. Let's do the console password. Line. Console 0. Let's give it a password of class. And then login. Let's do enable. Secret. Let's call it class 1. And let's do line VTY 0 to 4. Password class 2. And then login. Alright. And let's do Control Z. And let's copy. Run to start. Enter, enter. Now I have it in the NVRAM of the switch. Now let me close the hyperterminal. Minimize. Let me take out the console port. Console cable. Go back to PC. Go to run. And type telnet. What's the IP address? 192.168.10.4, because that's the IP address of the switch. What's the password? Class 2. I wrote it wrong. Class 2. Class 2. Oh, now I'm in. No, I'm not in. Let me exit. And let me, I had the caps on, believe it or not. Let me telnet again. Telnet, space, 192.168.10.4. Now I type class 2, I'm in. Type EN, and you type class 1. Now I'm in the privilege. But if you type show VLAN, you see here's VLAN 1 and all the ports that are on the switch in VLAN 1. You actually given the IP address to VLAN 1. Hit spacebar. If you type show run, that's your running configuration file with all the ports. And here's the IP address. Again, how do you configure? How do you make sure that these two passwords are encrypted? You go to config J and you type SER for service, hit the tab key, PAS, tab key again, and hit enter. And now do Control Z, show run, and then go all the way to the bottom to show you the encrypted passwords on the bottom. All right? Go back to, let's go back to the slides. All right, so there you go. Get that already. Manual configuration. By the way, if you click on here, that means your PC will automatically contact a DHCP server to get an IP address. All right, this is for conflict purposes. We did pinging to make sure that we can ping each other, right? We tested that, and that ends chapter 1. All right, I I hope you have enjoyed it. Make sure you answer the 2 questions that I gave you, right? And write the answers in Microsoft Word and send them in. And we will see you next time in Chapter 3. Keep up the good work. All right. Good night, guys.